My train left Danzig in the morning, generally about 8 o'clock, but once a week we had to wait for the arrival of the steamer from Stockholm. It was the morning of the steamer's arrival that I came down from the hotel and found that my engineer had been so seriously injured that he could not perform his work. I went immediately to the engine-house to procure another engineer, for I supposed there were 3 or 4 in reserve there, but I was disappointed. I heard the puffing of the steamer, and the passengers would be on hand in 15 minutes. I ran to the guards and asked them if they knew where there was an engineer, but they did not. I then went to the firemen and asked them if any one of them felt competent to run the engine to Bromberg. No one dared to attempt it. The distance was nearly 100 miles. What was to be done? The steamer stopped at the wharf, and those who were going on by rail came flocking to the station. They had eaten breakfast on board the boat, and were all ready for a fresh start. The train was in readiness in the long station-house, and the engine was steaming and puffing away impatiently in the distant firing-house. It was past 9 o'clock.
"Come, why don't we start?"
growled an old fat Swede, who had been watching me narrowly for the last 15 minutes. And upon this there was a general chorus of anxious inquiry, which soon settled to downright murmuring. At this juncture someone touched me on the elbow. I turned and saw a stranger by my side. I thought he was going to remonstrate with me for my backwardness. In fact, I began to have strong temptations to pull off my uniform, for every anxious eye was fixed upon the glaring badges, which marked me as the chief officer of the train. However, this stranger was a middle-aged man, tall and stout, with a face of great energy and intelligence. His eye was black and brilliant, so brilliant that I could not gaze steadily into it, though I tried, and his lips, which were very thin, seemed more like polished marble than human flesh. His dress was black throughout, and not only set with exact nicety, but was scrupulously clean and neat.
"You want an engineer, I understand,"
he said in a low, cautious tone, at the same time gazing quietly about him, as though he wanted no one to hear what he said. "I do," I replied. "My train is all ready, and we have no engineer within 20 miles of this place."
"Well, sir, I am going to Bromberg. I must go, and I will run the engine for you."
"Ha!" I uttered. "Are you an engineer?"
"I am, sir, one of the oldest in the country, and I am now on my way to make arrangements for a great improvement I have invented for the application of steam to a locomotive. My name is Martin Kohler. If you wish, I will run as far as Bromberg, and I will show you running that is running."
Was I not fortunate? I determined to accept the man's offer at once, and so I told him. He received my answer with a nod and a smile. I went with him to the house, where we found the engine in charge of the fireman, and all ready for a start. Kroller got upon the platform, and I followed him. I had never seen a man betray such a peculiar aptness amid machinery as he did. He let on the steam in an instant, but yet with care and judgment, and he backed up to the baggage carriage with the most exact nicety. I had seen enough to assure me that he was thoroughly acquainted with the business, and I felt composed once more. I gave my engine up to the new man, and then hastened away to the office. Word was passed for all the passengers to take their seats, and soon afterward I waved my hand to the engineer. There was a puff, a groaning of the heavy axle-trees, a trembling of the building, and the train was in motion. I leaped upon the platform of the guard carriage, and in a few minutes more the station-house was far behind us. In less than an hour we reached Dierschau, where we took up the passengers that had come on the Königsberg Railway. Here I went forward, and asked Kroller how he liked the engine. He replied that he liked it very much. "But," he added, with a strange sparkling of the eye,
Wait until I get my improvement, and then you will see traveling. Why, I could run an engine of my construction to the moon in 24 hours.
I smiled at what I thought his enthusiasm, and then went back to my station. As soon as the Königsberg passengers were all on board, and their baggage carriage attached, we started on again. Soon after, I went into the guard carriage and sat down. An early train from Königsberg had been through 2 hours before, and was awaiting us at Little Askew, where we took on board the Western Mail.
"How we go?"
uttered one of the guards, some 15 minutes after we had left Dirschau. "The new engineer is trying the speed," I replied, not yet having any fear. But ere long I began to apprehend he was running a little too fast. The carriages began to sway to and fro, and I could hear exclamations of fright from the passengers.
"Good heavens!"
cried one of the guards, coming in at that moment.
"What is that fellow doing? Look, sir, and see how we are going."
I looked at the window, and found that we were dashing along at a speed never before traveled on that road. Posts, fences, rocks, and trees flew by in one undistinguished mass, and the carriages now swayed fearfully. I started to my feet, and met a passenger on the platform. He was one of the chief owners of our road, and was just on his way to Berlin. He was pale and excited.
"Sir," he gasped, "is Martin Kroller on the engine?"
"Yes," I told him.
"What? Didn't you know him?"
"No," I repeated, somewhat puzzled. "What do you mean? He told me his name was Kroller, and that he was an engineer. We had no one to run the engine, and—"
"You took him?"
interrupted the man.
"Good heavens, sir, he is as crazy as a man can be. He turned his brain over a new plan for applying steam power. I saw him at the station, but did not fully recognize him, as I was in a hurry. Just now one of your passengers told me that your engineers were all gone this morning, and that you found one that was a stranger to you. Then I knew the man whom I had seen was Martin Kroller. He had escaped from the hospital at Stettin. You must get him off somehow."
The whole fearful truth was now open to me. The speed of the train was increasing every moment, and I knew that a few more miles per hour would launch us all into destruction. I called to the guard, and then made my way forward as quickly as possible. I reached the back platform of the tender, and there stood Kroller upon the engine-board, his hat and coat off, his long black hair floating wildly in the wind, his shirt unbuttoned at the front, his sleeves rolled up, with a pistol in his teeth, and thus glaring upon the fireman, who lay motionless upon the fuel. The furnace was stuffed till the very latch of the door was red-hot, and the whole engine was quivering and swaying, as though it would shiver to pieces. "Kroller! Kroller!" I cried at the top of my voice. The crazy engineer started and caught the pistol in his hand. Oh, how those great black eyes glared, and how ghastly and frightful the face looked.
"Ha, ha, ha!"
he yelled demoniacally, glaring upon me like a roused lion.
"They said that I could not make it, but see my new power, see my new engine. I made it, and they are jealous of me. I made it, and when it was done, they stole it from me. But I have found it. For years I have been wandering in search of my great engine, and they said it was not made, but I have found it. I knew it this morning when I saw it at Danzig, and I was determined to have it, and I've got it. Ho, ho, ho! We're on our way to the moon, I say. We'll be in the moon in 24 hours. Down, down, villain! If you move, I'll shoot you."
This was spoken to the poor fireman, who at that moment attempted to rise, and the frightened man sank back again. "Here's Little Askew just before us," cried out one of the guard. But even as he spoke, the buildings were at hand. A sickening sensation settled upon my heart, for I supposed that we were now gone. The houses flew by like lightning. I knew if the officers here had turned the switch as usual, we should be hurled into eternity in one fearful crash. I saw a flash. It was another engine. I closed my eyes, but still we thundered on. The officers had seen our speed, and knowing that we would not be able to stop in that distance, they had changed the switch so that we went forward. But there was sure death ahead if we did not stop. Only 15 miles from us was the town of Schwetz on the Vistula, and at the rate we were going we should be there in a few minutes, for each minute carried us over a mile. The shrieks of the passengers now rose above the crash of the rails, and more terrific than all else arose the demoniac yells of the mad engineer.
"Merciful heavens!"
gasped the guardsman.
"There's not a moment to lose. Schwetz is close.
But hold," he added.
"Let's shoot him."
At that moment a tall, stout German student came over the platform where we stood, and saw that the madman had his heavy pistol aimed at us. He grasped a huge stick of wood, and with a steadiness of nerve which I could not have commanded, he hurled it with such force and precision that he knocked the pistol from the maniac's hand. I saw the movement, and on the instant that the pistol fell, I sprang forward, and the German followed me. I grasped the man by the arm, but I should have been nothing in his mad power had I been alone. He would have hurled me from the platform had not the student at that moment struck him upon the head with a stick of wood, which he caught as he came over the tender. Crawler settled down like a dead man, and on the next instant I shut off the steam and opened the valve. As the free steam shrieked and howled in its escape, the speed began to decrease, and in a few minutes more the danger was past. As I settled back, entirely overcome by the wild emotions that had raged within me, we began to turn the river, and before I was fairly recovered, the firemen had stopped the train in the station house at Schwetz. Martin Crawler, still insensible, was taken from the platform, and as we carried him to the guard-room, one of the guard recognized him and told us that he had been there about 2 weeks before.
"He came," said the guard, "and swore that an engine which stood nearby was his. He said it was one he had made to go to the moon in, and that it had been stolen from him. We sent for more help to arrest him, and he fled."
"Well," I replied with a shudder, "I wish he had approached me in the same way, but he was more cautious at Danzig." At Schwartz we found an engineer to run the engine to Bromberg, and having taken out the western mail for the next northern mail to carry along, we saw that Crawler would be properly attended to, and then started on. The rest of the trip we ran in safety, though I could see the passengers were not wholly at ease, and would not be until they were entirely clear of the railway. Martin Crawler remained insensible from the effects of the blow nearly 2 weeks, and when he recovered from that, he was sound again. His insanity was all gone. I saw him about 3 weeks afterward, but he had no recollection of me. He remembered nothing of the past year, not even his mad freak on my engine. But I remembered it, and I remember it still, and the people need never fear that I shall be imposed upon again by a crazy engineer.